Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into one of the most persistent and just fascinating puzzles in animal behavior,
Hmm.
natal dispersal. Why is it that in so many species, the moment an organism becomes an adult and, leaves its birthplace,
Yeah.
the decision to go or stay is just fundamentally different for males versus females?
It's a huge question.
We see these stark differences everywhere, from tiny insects to massive mammals, and figuring out what drives one sex to, hit the road while the other prefers to stick around is, well, it's key to understanding evolution itself.
And it's a huge question because dispersal, just leaving home, is essentially an evolutionary insurance policy.
Right.
Historically, the established drivers we look at are pretty clear. You disperse to avoid inbreeding depression.
The genetic cost.
The genetic cost of mating with close relatives, exactly.
Mm.
You disperse to limit kin competition, especially if the resources at home are tight.
Sure.
And increasingly, we know you disperse to cope with the immense risk that comes from a fluctuating, unpredictable environment.
And, we look across the animal kingdom, we see these common patterns, right?
Oh, absolutely.
In a lot of monogamous bird species, it's the females who tend to move out.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at polygamous mammals, and it's usually the males who are kind of genetically wired to move.
Yes.
But here's the thing. Traditional theoretical models, the ones that establish all these basic principles, they often made this quiet assumption. They just assumed that the crucial reproductive event, mating, happened after the animal had already moved.
And that assumption, well, it turns out it's the critical flaw in the whole picture.
Okay.
Previous theories were brilliant, but they so frequently overlooked a single, powerful variable, the timing of copulation relative to the dispersal event. So our mission today is to dive into a study that shows, through careful simulation, that the interaction between when mating happens and how unstable the environment is can be the singular sufficient condition to drive radical sex-biased dispersal.
So timing isn't just important, it's everything.
It's everything in evolution.
And to really test this hypothesis, the researchers needed an organism that naturally exhibits this combination, right? Female biased dispersal and early mating.
Yep.
Their choice. The cabbage white butterfly. Specifically, the subspecies Pieris rape crucivora.
A very familiar insect.
Exactly, we've all seen them. But ecologically, they're fascinating because the females copulate in their natal habitat, often right after emerging,
Right.
and then they disperse much more frequently and further than the males. It's the perfect natural experiment.
It really is. When you look at this butterfly, you're looking at an animal that has basically evolved in a state of chaos.
Now, let's focus on that chaos. Tell us more about the butterfly's life history strategy, because that seems directly related to this environmental volatility.
They are classic Earth strategies.
And what does that mean in simple terms?
Well, it means they bet on quantity over quality. They produce a huge number of smaller offspring, and they're inherently adapted to volatile environments by having this ability to disperse over long distances.
So they don't try to dominate one stable niche?
No, they try to survive a volatile landscape by spreading their bets around.
And the landscape they live in is volatile because they feed on cruciferous crops. So you're thinking cabbage, broccoli, canola.
Exactly.
Which create these, I guess, beautiful, massive, rich, but ultimately very patchy habitats.
Very patchy. And these habitats are constantly being disturbed by human actions.
Right, like farming.
A farmer decides to harvest early, or uses a pesticide, or suddenly changes crops. For the butterfly, this is a completely unpredictable, stochastic event.
So one day the carrying capacity is, say, 100.
And the next day it's 0. This instability is the primary driver of the whole evolutionary puzzle.
And their mating strategy is just utterly critical to dealing with this. The female's reproductive timing is the key here.
It is. When a female emerges, she's a virgin, and males find her very quickly.
Yeah.
She averages only about 2 copulations in the field.
Morley, too.
But importantly, once she receives a normal spermatophore, which you can think of that as the male's entire reproductive contribution, it's a large sperm packet.
Okay.
She becomes functionally monogamous for several days.
What does that mean, functionally monogamous?
We call it the refractory period. During this time, she just refuses any further mating. And what does she do instead?
Lays eggs.
She oviposits explosively.
Yeah.
She lays eggs. So this means that the vast majority of her reproductive output for the next few days is genetically secured before she undertakes any major long-distance movement.
Wow. So she's already packaged the sperm and eggs and is ready to just distribute them.
Precisely.
And the male's strategy, it's got to be the complete opposite then.
It is. It makes perfect sense from a fitness perspective. The males are classic polygamous players.
Mating multiple times.
Multiple times a day, searching for mates. They spend most of their time in the natal habitat. And why?
Because that's where the females are.
That's where the newly emerged virgin females are. Any day a male spends dispersing is a day he potentially misses a mating opportunity with a high-value, newly emerged female.
So his best strategy is to stay put, reproduce as much as possible, and wait for the next virgin female to, pop out of a chrysalis nearby.
That's the winning move for him.
So to analyze how this timing difference affects dispersal genetics over generations, the researchers had to translate all of this into a simulation.
Yes.
Tell us about that setup, because the details here really matter.
They modeled a metapopulation, which is, essentially a population that's spread across multiple interlinked local habitats.
Okay.
They used 16 local habitats, arranged in a simple 4x4 grid. Dispersal was just defined as movement to one of the adjacent patches.
So we're not talking about migration across continents. This is local.
No, this is local risk mitigation, moving across a patchy field.
And the way they modeled the genetics of the decision to disperse, that's where it gets really clever.
It is.
They needed a way for evolution to independently choose dispersal rates for males and females.
Exactly. So they introduced two separate genetic loci. One determined dispersal behavior only in males, and the other determined it only in females.
I see.
And crucially, each locus had 6 possible alleles, which coded for the percentage of the adult lifetime an individual would spend after dispersal.
So it's like a spectrum of commitment to moving.
It is. Think of it that way.
So if an individual had the allele that coded for 0%,
that's your complete non-disperser. Genetically fixed to home base. If they carry the allele for 100%, they dispersed immediately upon maturity.
and spent their whole adult life elsewhere.
Right. And then you have the 20, 40, 60% alleles for all the intermediate strategies.
And the goal was to see, over many generations and under different conditions, which of these alleles would become fixed.
Which behavioral strategy would win the evolutionary race for each sex.
Okay, so now we get to the core comparison. We have the simulation, the genetics, and the environmental control.
And the timing.
And the timing.
We compared 2 scenarios. Model 1 was pre-dispersal copulation.
So this mimics our cabbage white butterfly.
Exactly. Females always copulate in the natal patch before they decide whether to leave. Their reproductive contribution is secured early.
And Model 2 was post-dispersal copulation?
So in that case, female dispersers have to wait. They only secure the mating and lay eggs after they've successfully immigrated and settled in a new habitat.
And the non-dispersers just stay home and reproduce there.
Naturally.
So first, the control case. What happened under stable conditions?
Well, when the carrying capacity of all 16 habitats was constant, no fluctuations, sex-biased dispersal was generally suppressed.
So not much difference between the sexes?
Very little. Both sexes might disperse slightly, sometimes not at all, unless the population got really small, which forces high-kin competition. But a predictable world just doesn't require these complex gendered risk mitigation strategies.
Okay. Here is where the real mechanism starts to reveal itself. They introduced the fluctuating environment. Each local habitat's carrying capacity changed randomly, sometimes booming, sometimes crashing. And Model 1, the pre-dispersal copulation model,
It showed a dramatic result.
which was
It strongly, and I mean undeniably, facilitated female-biased dispersal.
wow.
The females frequently evolved a moderate dispersal timing, so those 0 to 20% post-dispersal alleles coexisted.
That's the bet-hedging strategy in action.
It is. They lay some eggs at home, then they fly away to lay the rest somewhere else, ensuring their offspring are distributed across this uncertain landscape.
But the males, in this exact same highly risky, unpredictable environment, they showed the opposite.
A complete fixation. They were overwhelmingly fixed on the non-dispersal strategy, allele 0. They stayed put.
That's the stunning conclusion then. The fluctuating environment drives strong female-biased dispersal, but only.
Only when mating happens early.
So what about the alternative, Model 2?
Right, so in Model 2, when copulation could only happen after dispersal and the environment was fluctuating, sex-dependent dispersal did not evolve significantly.
It just didn't happen.
Not in any meaningful way. If the females had to wait until they arrived at a new, potentially less suitable location to mate, they couldn't successfully spread the male's genes first.
And the evolutionary cost in Model 2 became devastating, didn't it?
It did. The cost of being a discurser, the energy spent flying, the risks of predation, It suddenly outweighed the benefits.
Okay.
And crucially, a high dispersal cost in Model 2 often led to the extinction of local populations entirely, right across the grid.
Why? Why extinction?
Because the non-dispersers were wiped out when their local patch crashed.
Of course.
And if the dispersers were still waiting to mate after moving, the vacant habitats just weren't recolonized in time to save the whole metapopulation.
So Model 1 created evolutionary stability, while Model 2 created fragility.
That's a perfect way to put it.
That distinction is phenomenal. So the study shows that previous models missed this potent synergy. It's not just the fluctuating environment, and it's not just the mating timing. It's the interaction between pre-dispersal copulation and the fluctuating environment.
That's the crucial, sufficient mechanism for female bias dispersal to evolve strongly and, stabilize the population.
Precisely. And this works because there's a sexual difference in who is responsible for spreading the risk.
Exactly. When your local patches are prone to disappearing, you need a bet-hedging strategy to spread your genes across space.
So if I'm a male butterfly and I mate with a female right before she flies away, she's carrying my entire reproductive contribution, that spermatophore, with her.
To multiple potential new locations.
She is effectively acting as my genetic dispersal vehicle.
She is outsourcing your genetic risk. Because the females have already mated before leaving, they are the ones distributing your genes across different volatile habitats through their sort of sequential egg laying.
They're partitioning their reproductive effort across space and time.
That's the mechanism.
Wait, if the environment is so unstable, why wouldn't it be safer for both sexes to move? Why does the male risk everything by staying put?
That's the critical evolutionary calculation. Since the male's genes are already being spread by his dispersing partners, the benefit of him moving decreases dramatically.
Okay, so the benefit goes down. What about the cost?
The cost of moving is huge for him. The male loses potential mating opportunities in that highly dense natal patch where new virgin females are emerging every day.
I see.
It becomes highly advantageous for the male to remain in the natal habitat to maximize his mating frequency. Male dispersal is strongly selected against in this scenario.
Because his fitness is best served by staying and securing more of those early matings.
Exactly.
And in Model 2, when the female can't spread his genes early, the male must disperse himself to spread the risk.
Which immediately wipes out the sexual difference in dispersal timing. The stability of the whole system just hinges on the female carrying that reproductive load during her initial flight.
You also mentioned we need to connect this back to population size, K, the carrying capacity.
Yes. The models found that female bias dispersal became even more evident when K was larger. So, for example, K equals 100 versus K equals 10.
That seems counterintuitive. I would have thought that in a large population there's less pressure to disperse because there are more mates available.
That's about mitigating other variables. When K is small, dispersal is favored almost irrespective of sex.
Why is that?
Because small populations suffer greater kin competition, yes, but they also have a much higher probability of what we call stochastic sex ratio biases.
Meaning?
Imagine a patch where just by chance only males emerge for a few generations.
Oh, right.
Someone has to move immediately to find a mate, regardless of the mating timing.
It becomes a necessity.
It does. But when K is large, those small population effects fade away, and the fundamental optimized strategy driven by predispersal mating just takes over.
So females spread the risk, and males stay home and reproduce.
And that sexual difference becomes amplified and stabilized.
This deep dive has fundamentally shifted how we look at dispersal. To synthesize, the core finding is clear. Strong female bias dispersal is the optimal evolutionary outcome when two conditions meet. One, the environment is highly volatile and fluctuating.
Yes.
And two, the females copulate before dispersal.
It's an incredibly elegant explanation for a phenomenon that had many sort of partial theories before.
And this unique mating system, it essentially outsources the genetic risk spreading to the female, which allows the male to maximize his mating frequency at home.
And while this is based on P-RAP-A, the models are very relevant to many species, especially, agricultural pests that live in patchy, unstable habitats and have high dispersal ability.
So what does this all mean for the bigger picture of evolutionary ecology?
What raises a vital question about where we focus our research. How many seemingly complex ecological patterns are actually driven by the simple behavioral timing of a single event, like when mating occurs? When studying migration and dispersal, we often dedicate vast amounts of resources tracking where animals go and how far they travel.
Sure, with tags and everything.
But this study suggests we should perhaps be asking when they secured their reproductive future relative to that journey. That timing dictates which sex is carrying the risk and which sex is optimizing for opportunity.
That makes you consider our own interaction with nature in a completely new light. Think about the intensive farming and land use practices we employ today. Practices that create these highly productive but fundamentally patchy and unstable habitats for wildlife. We're inadvertently creating the exact evolutionary pressure, high-risk, patchy resources that drives these extreme sex-specific migration strategies.
That's a powerful thought.
The instability we create is dictating which sex must leave and which must stay generation after generation.